Hello, my name is Leora. I'm a part-time furniture flipper out of Windsor, Colorado. What started as a hobby in 2020 is now a full-blown obsession. I love taking old, unloved furniture and creating beautiful works of art. Come join me in my studio to see how I make diamonds from the rough. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. This week we are going to do the sister piece to the Dapper Dan chair. Maybe it's a brother piece, I don't know. You can see this one already was covered in leather, so I don't have to do the reupholstery. We are going to leave the image for a surprise. Stick around. Welcome to Diamonds from the Rough. Before I started recording, I gave this chair a quick clean on both the leather and the wood with the TSP cleaner, and then I started doing a tape off of all the rivets with some painter's tape, and finally I gave it a scuff sand with a medium grit sandpaper. From there, I immediately jumped into painting on a white paint. This is not primer. This is a white paint that has primer and top coat built into it. A little spill on the bottom leather was easy to clean up with just a spritz of water. Next, I started painting the body of the chair with Silk All-in-One mineral paint from Dixie Belle in the color Hampton Olive. This paint has both a primer and a top coat built in. Next color is going to be the cushion color. This is rustic red. I was going to say rusty nail, which is similar but different. When it has a lot of pigment, your chalk paints will get very, very thick. I like to clean that out. And if your paint gets this thick, you need to add some water. I wanted to make my rustic red a slightly pinker shade, so I'm adding a little bit of Dixie Belle's chalk paint in the color Peony. The thing I did learn is that red is a very overwhelming color. I had to add a lot of the pink. I'm just spreading the chalk paint blend that I made directly onto the leather without any prep, and I had no problems with adhesion whatsoever. The paint just soaks in even though it's leather. This is where I landed on day 2. It's important to note that this was a leather seat. It's got some cracking in it, not from the paint. It has cracking in it because it's how it was in the first place. This is not crunchy. The next step before you go on when painting fabric is to give it a light sand in between. You want a fine grit. I like to choose 220 to 400, anywhere in there. These ones are both around that range that I just gave. So I'm going to go with the harder one first and see how I like that. And if it seems like it's doing too much sanding, I will go to the finer one. And you're just going to give it a rub. You're not trying to sand the paint off, obviously. Then give it a dust off with a microfiber towel. This is a stained towel, so it's a little hard to tell. But if you notice, there's just the slightest bit of pinkish dust because it's not supposed to take it off. It was already kind of soaked in. But now this feels infinitely smoother than that one. So I'm going to keep doing that in between layers of paint. As far as the paint goes, one of the things I checked when I came in this morning was a scratch test. It's got 2 coats on here. It's only been a day, so it's not cured, it's dry. There's a difference between drying and curing. Curing is going to take about 30 days, and at that point, you're really going to have to bang into it to scratch it at all, and that would be more like intentional or having a bad accident. You're not just going to walk by and your pants will brush it and you'll scratch it. So I just gave it a light scratch test. I give it a little bit of a honk of water. I wonder if that's going to make that kind of disappear. Yep, so the little scratchings that you could see, that really took it away just by giving it a little wipe down with water. Before we move on, let's chat, because you may be watching this and freaking out going, lady, what are you doing? You're painting a chair that your butt's going to be on. And what if I'm wearing shorts? And what if it's in Michigan in August and I'm sweaty? Or what if I'm wearing white pants? What am I going to do sitting in this red chair? Here's the thing. Paint is going to soak into this fabric, and then I'm going to top coat it multiple times with a wax. This is Dixie Belle's Easy Peasy Spray Wax. I feel like Mr. Rogers right now. I should change my shoes. Anyway, it is literally exactly what it says. It's easy peasy. and it's a spray wax. So all you have to do is shake it up really, really well. Spray it on whatever you've just painted. You can use this on wood, you can use it on leather, you can use it on anything you've painted. It's going to seal the paint because chalk paint is porous. So if you seal it up with wax or a top coat, that's going to fill in the pores, it's going to suck that in, and then it's going to be protected. The color is not going to be coming off on your sleeves, on your butt, on your back, anything like that. I'm using this one in particular because I'm using Dixie Belle paint, so I know their formulas work together. I'm not afraid of mixing and matching. I am going to be using mostly Dixie Belle, if not all, on this particular project, but I have mixed every paint line I have on the same piece, and I've never had a problem. But let's start with making it easier on ourselves. Just sitting here watching as I'm spraying, the wax is soaking into the paint like a sponge. So that's a really good sign. After it's soaked in as much as it will, I'm going to go back and buff it with microfiber. And you may have noticed I didn't seal this because this is going to have the paper over it. So it's irrelevant if this paint is sealed because the paper is going to be sealed. Plus, I'm putting it on with top coat, so it's going to actually get it anyway. I just learned something new. The fabric that was originally on this chair was not this leather, so it's been reupholstered. I wanted to bring you in a little bit closer for looking at what I'm doing now. There are little imperfections in the leather. It is not a perfectly smooth surface. I'm not going to paint it all in one direction. I want to swirl, and that will help me get the paint into all the little crevices, and I'm going to pull this wrinkle out so that it doesn't stay lighter. You see, it is actually a little lighter already, so I'm going to have to make sure I get the paint in there. This one is a pure chalk paint, so I am going to get my brush wet, and I can also get my chair damp because I want this paint to move around. The paper that I'm working with has many, many colors in it, and the colors that I want to really pull out because I wanted this to be a masculine counterpart to the cat chair that I did before. I want to have some deeper, richer, more masculine colors, and that's why I went with this brown green, like khaki green. Hampton Olive, this is the Silk All-in-One. This is by Dixie Belle, and it has the top coat and the primer and the color all built into one. Dixie Belle's Collard Greens, which you saw on the other chair at the very top. Probably don't remember it, but it was there. This color is going to be the highlight to this. I want to deepen the overall look of this because right now it looks kind of just monochromatic because it is, and I don't like that. In the back edges, around the cushion, and probably just in a few other places because I want to make it look more aged and more like this is a chair that would be in a smoking den. That's the imagery I'm getting. You can put it anywhere you want. A little bit of a shadowing, shading color. It's called Midnight Sky, and it's a blue-black by Dixie Belle as well. And I have hardly any left at all. I mean, it barely even, it's not even moving. It's not much in there. So all I'm going to do is use the barest amount on my brush, and then I'm going to shade with it. The base color, the highlight color, and the color in between. I'm going to kind of stipple over this chair because I want to bring it a little bit more depth and dimension as well. If you want to paint furniture and you want to make it interesting, you need more than one color. If you want to make it clean and that's your aesthetic and you just don't really want anything else going on, the single color is fine. But if you want to have it be something where you go on, oh, I want to look closer, I want to touch it, I want to ask questions about it, it's probably got a lot of colors going on. So now let's pivot down so you can see what I'm working on. Start with bringing our greens together. Brush for each color. I'm using a Maya brush. This is from Daydream Apothecary, and it's kind of like a soft natural bristle. And the quote on here is, "Your belief and your work will speak for you." Very true. And then this is one from Zebra. Zebra brushes are amazing. They are not very expensive. You can pick them up at big box stores like Home Depot or Lowe's for like $10 to $12. These are really great if you don't want to spend a whole lot of money, or even if you just want the particular shape. This is a square. As always, I'm going to need a mister bottle. I always keep towels nearby. Whenever you're blending, you have to have a wet base coat. Shake up my paint. And for this paint job, because I'm not really trying to get coverage, I can mostly just use what's in the cap. A little bit of water. And next up is my collard greens. Same thing, don't need a whole lot of it. This time I'm going to get my brush wet. Just a tiny little bit on the tips of the brush. And look at that. Instant depth. We're going to glaze. If you haven't ever seen glazing done before, it comes in a jar and it looks like it's blue when you're doing black glaze. So for whatever reason, it's not black, but it will be. Just going to put it on with this, and I'm going to put it in areas that I want my black to sink in. I'm going to put it into these grooves here. So with the glaze, you just paint it on. You can be sloppy, just don't get it on everything else. When I am satisfied that all my grooves are sufficiently glazy, I just wipe it back. So you see the bluish color there, that's the black glaze, so that'll be black when it dries. One thing I don't want is liquid like stuck in the cracks. I want it to be all the way down in the bottom, not sitting in like bubbles. I'm also going to wax these lines that run along the outside here, and I want to make it stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to put on some Dixie Belle clear wax first, because you want clear wax down before you do any colored wax, in the event you want to pull any of it back. Because if you just put wax on raw paint, then you're going to get a lot more than you really bargained for. And I'll let that dry and then I'll buff it out. And then when I go back to put on black wax, I will have enough control that I can pull it back if it's on there too dark. So I'm using a little wax brush. It's really just a natural bristle, short bristle brush. You can clean these. Dixie Belle's wax is water-based. This is my favorite way to be. Paint on everything, but afraid to touch everything. Oh my goodness, that feels so good. Now, waxing is usually one of the last things that you would do, but I keep getting ahead of myself and I have ideas and I want to see them through before I'm really on that step. But I do what I want. I'm an artist. I do what I want. Usually wax is the very last thing you do because the wax is self-curing and you won't need to seal it again. And if you are going to use a wax that is oil-based, you definitely want to do that last. I can't even paint over this wax. Is it advisable? Not really. Is it impossible? Not really. Now, for the black wax. I've had this for 3 years. I use it a lot, and the older it gets, the drier it gets, and the better I like it, because then it doesn't smear around quite as much. I've got a wax brush that I only use with dark waxes, because I never use this for white waxes. I have a white wax brush or clear, and I have a colored of any description wax brush like this. Now that I've got my clear wax on here, I'm going to go in with the dark wax in just a sloppy manner. It does not have to be neat. And go right along the lines that I want to fill in with dark accents. You do not need a bunch, just a little tap like that, and then I smear it in. Now the beautiful thing about this is that it just gives depth all the way around. Just with a dry shop towel. I'm not digging, I'm just wiping straight across. And because I had the clear wax down, it's not staying super blotchy. Without adding any more wax to the brush, I'm just gonna come and brush lightly over the rest of this because it's going to stick into every little ridge of paint and give this just a little bit of darkness so it looks like it's been worn, like it's been loved, like it's been in somebody's house for a while. And I understand that sometimes when you're looking for furniture, that's not what you want. But with this type of furniture, I kind of feel like you want it to look cozy. And cozy means lived in. What seems to be missing here? Any guesses? You think you've waited long enough to see what the paper's gonna be? Do you want to see it? You want to see it? Okay. Dun da da da! This is DOG, another whimsy-kel paper. Now let's decoupage. This paper is strong enough to allow me to slightly reposition. Oh yeah. This guy's had 2 layers of top coat, but here's the part where, hey, I messed up again. It was a little wet down here on the paint. So when I push the cushion, you can see that it tore a little bit of the paper. So I'm gonna have to sand that off. Lessons learned. Today, what I'm going to focus on is cutting away this part where the, I started to do it and then I realized, no, I have to film that. Underneath here is where the nail head trim is, so I have to cut away the paper. This is the easiest part of my job, is I get to just sit in my comfy chair. I'm using just a regular straight blade. There's a wrinkle there I'm going to try and salvage. Maybe, we'll see. Do I want to? Yeah, I probably do. I am just cutting right into the seam where those nail heads are already living. Aha! Oh, you devil wrinkle. This is really the approach I should take, is grabbing the tape, not the paper. I'm gonna pull that wrinkle out. Now that I have this exposed, I'm gonna put in some top coat more purposefully. And I'm going to glue this part down and this part down again, but exposing this. It's tedious work. 6 o'clock in the morning and I have to get outside. The sun's about to come up and I have to start getting some exercise before I go to work. I need to glue this down as quickly as I can so it can be setting while I'm at work. I'm just using a little artist brush, using some of that top coat from Debbie's Design Diary, which will dry clear so it doesn't matter if I get it onto my tacks a little bit. I don't care if I'm being sloppy with it. I don't care if I'm putting a little bit of wrinkle in it. You can absolutely work with wrinkles in place. It's not the end of the world. I think a lot of people get really wrapped up about it being absolutely perfect, and I was definitely one of those when I first started doing decoupage, and the first piece I put on had wrinkles, and I thought, oh no, it's ruined. And it's not, because the drying is going to do the hardest part of the work for me. It's going to shrink up the paper a little bit. As much as I would love to spend a lot more of my time in here, I do have a full-time job. But you can do steps like this that take time and patience, which I don't have in abundance in either case. But when I do this, I can just let it dry during the day. And when I come back at night with whatever time I have, a step is done. I feel a lot more confident now. It's looking better. This is my morning walk. Moon is still up, but I'm walking into a Colorado sunrise. It's gonna be a good day. Here's a little bit better shot of my sunrise. I just got back from delivering a grandfather clock that I painted a year ago, and it sold on Etsy, so I had to drive it to Minnesota with my youngest child who is getting the driver's permit hours. So that was wonderful, but I am back and I am ready to finish up this chair. What I have done without the camera on was just a little bit of touch-ups. You can see all these brushes that I have here. That is to press the cushion away from the paper so that I could touch up the red back at the back of the cushion. It should be just about dry now. It is dry enough. I also would like to make a brief commercial. No, I'm not sponsored by anybody, but let me just tell you about this. This is the Helen brush from Daydream Apothecary, and it is a synthetic, but this is the best cleaning up brush I have ever had. Really, any of theirs, because it's all the same bristles. But the point I want to make to you is this was soaked with paint, and I left it for well over a week and a half, and all I used was some hand soap, which is probably not what's recommended, and water, and this puppy cleaned up so nicely. These are amazing. Amazing cleaning up brushes are worth their weight in gold. So if you're going to spend any extra money on something, I would suggest getting some good brushes. End of public service announcement. Since my next step is blending in the paper, I grabbed every color of Dixie Belle paint that I had that I could see anywhere in this paper. I'll decide as I go, because I try not to have too much of a plan, because that can get a little bit boring and predictable, and if you just let the paint take you where it will, it's a little bit more fun. Hi, I'm here. I apologize for the super close-up, but I want you to be able to see what I'm doing here. I'm going to paint this all in. I have a million paints down here, and I have enough brushes to basically get through one brush per color family. You have no idea how hard this is. If you have not ever tried to film yourself working, this is no joke. Finding the angles where you're not blocking what you're trying to teach and show is really tough. I would like to note, every single time, without fail, I do something new that I've never tried before. There are a million paint techniques. There are a million products to try. There are a million strokes and colors, but you should never be afraid to just try it, because as some of my mentors in this industry say often, it is just paint. It's just paint, and it's not the end of the world. If something is an absolute atrocity compared to what you wanted it to be, who cares? Paint over it. Make it easy on yourself. So don't hold yourself so accountable that you can't enjoy this. This was my new thing to try. I am literally blending it on the canvas. These two colors together are making that shade pretty close. So I am going to keep on doing that because I really liked how that looked. Oh, I do want to show you how I open these jars when they just won't open. I take the jar, I turn it on its side. I don't whack the jar against things, but I get a hammer. I know this sounds like it's going to go so badly, but trust me. Just give it a tap, turn it, tap it, and that always does it, because it breaks the seal of paint around the threads. Oh, this is gorgeous. The final step of blending before I go back and do a second coat is getting this edge to not be so abrupt between the paper and the paint. Here's the first coat of the blend of the paper going into the chair. When you step back, you really can't see the edge. Same with over here. Yep, we got some wrinkles. It's going to get a little bit darker. We brought in the yellows and the reds. But this part, I think, looks amazing. The top of the chair, instead of having a harsh line where the paper went, now just blends right in. So as you step back, you can see the full effect. I just have to show, this is the aftermath of when I get ideas. There is paint open everywhere. There are brushes absolutely everywhere, because that is how my creative process works. But all that mess created this beautiful edge, which I'm really proud of. Time for the next part of my creative process. Back of this chair is gloriously blank. And since it's so blank, I want to put something on it. These are both from Dixie Belle. The one on the left here, this is Nailhead Trim, and this one is Houndstooth. And I brought out my resident male and said, what do you think looks more masculine? And my husband, John, chose the Houndstooth stencil. If you've never stenciled before, let me show you how this is done. First thing I do is I dry fit it. I also kind of make a decision based on the pattern. Which way do I think it looks best? These are Mylar stencils, and it's basically like a thick plastic. For this one, I am going to have to center it, because if I pull this all the way over to the edge with this edge on the stencil, I won't have room to do another complete pattern. So this is going to be a centered design rather than a full-on side to side. I make sure that I am equally distant from both sides of the chair, and then tape it down. I decided to try and work a little bit smarter and not harder. I'm going to use one of my Maya brushes. This is another one of the Daydream Apothecaries. I am using the Eternal Decor Wax, and this is my very expensive Salsa Lid palette. I'm not going to use a lot. I don't want this to be super gold. Use what you have. Disposable is great. And you see, I'm just going to try and smear it around so that it's on the tips of my brush. And then I'm going to offload a little bit onto a paper towel, something else. It doesn't really matter what. And then holding it down, I'm going to tap the gold in place. I just want to hold it down so that I don't get anything underneath the stencil. You saw how much I used. That was such a tiny amount of wax, and it's really going far. You don't want to smear on this kind because there's all these little corners, and you can catch it on the brush and then end up getting underneath the stencil. Let's see what we created. Oh yeah, I love it. I could wait for this to dry, but since I was careful, I did not get wax on the back. And you want to make sure you line it up right before you start so your design continues properly. Repositional adhesive spray is really good for this. I can just hold it in place too. That's another option. Well, I think that looks fantastic. Any place that I see that I got some wax where I don't want it, like right there, wax removes wax. So all I have to do is get a little bit of clear wax. I'm going to put just a smidge on my rag here. I just noticed a couple little spots right there that I don't want gold to be. So I just wipe with a clear wax, and it removes the wax that was not supposed to be there, like an eraser. And now I don't have to come back and do a top coat over this. Next up is going around the rivets right here where I taped off because I want it to look red all the way around. And if you look closely where I had the tape, you can still see some leather. So I am just going in with a very tiny artist brush and I am brushing around the rivets, and that includes back in here. And I go in with my little shop towel and just wipe the paint back immediately so it's not on the rivets. Getting down to the absolute nitty-gritty on this. I have my gold accents. I have painted around all my rivets. And my final step that I wanted to do to make this have an aged sort of a look is Dixie Belle Black Wax. Because I have to get into these little corner edges, this is a French tip brush, so it's got a little bit of a point on it already. I am using a very small amount of black wax, and as I always do, I'm going to tap it off on something else so that I don't have such a heavy amount going in. I just want a slight shadow. The back of this is really coming out to be a showstopper. I still think it needs a little shade of bling. So I have a very tiny amount of that gold on my brush, and I am going to just dry brush all around the details. We have reached the part of this program where I can't keep stopping and going to the camera. I just got to get it done. Questions, please pop them in the comments later. I just really want to get this done today. It's all done. Well, I tried to load up some beautiful still shots I had of this, but it's getting so laggy that I can't even add those. So here is an inadvertently turned the wrong way short video of the finished product. You can see all the little gold gild highlights. You can see the red of the cushion, the paper, flaws and all, and this really cool stencil on the back. So I hope you have enjoyed this video. I'm sorry it looks a little jittery here at the end and that they're not staged photos. Hopefully I can figure out what's going on and fix it for next time. Thanks for watching.